Hello and welcome to the USA Cares podcast. I'm your host, Matt Castor. I am joined with my good friend, Maeve Armstrong. Hey, Maeve.
Hi.
Welcome back. Well, we're glad you guys would join us today. It's been a little while. We've been off on a little bit of a break, and we're glad to be back here with you. One of the cool things about doing this podcast is just being able to connect with some people who are close to our organization. Talk about some things going on, share some stories, that sort of thing. So I'm excited to be back at it. I want to give a big thank you to a couple sponsors, Roller Die Informing and McClellan Integrated Services, companies that are just doing a lot to help veterans through USA Cares, but also just a lot of good people. So big thank you to them. USA Cares, check us out, usacares.org if you want to learn more. We are working to eliminate the factors that often lead to veteran suicide. So a growing problem in the country, and we're trying to do everything we can to stop. So, Maeve, welcome. How are you feeling about co-hosting?
I feel pretty good. I feel like
Yeah?
I'm in a good spot. Everyone here is pretty great. So.
Well, we haven't been mean to you yet.
No, not yet.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for it to drop.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So, well, hey, listen, so today I'm excited to welcome back a guest. This guy is pretty cool. We had a chance to meet up recently in Washington, D.C., spend some time together. We've had a number of conversations, but I think just a great guy who fits in. His service to our country has been awesome. His story is interesting. He wrote a book called American to the Core, and so we'll touch on that a little bit. But please welcome back to the USA Cares podcast, retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Marine Corps, Mr. Jonathon Myers. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. You know, I was reminding you when we met up, and Maeve, I got to tell you this story. So this book my wife bought for me at Target. Little plug for Target, I guess.
Of course.
But for Target, a long time ago when we were going on vacation, I read it sitting on the beach, flew through the book in like 3 days, and reached out to Mr. Myers on LinkedIn. We connected, and we've talked a couple times. So it's been kind of a fun sequence of events to get to know you. But, yeah, so for those of you for the people who don't know who you are, maybe they haven't heard any of our past episodes, give us a real brief overview of who you are, what you've done, and what's brought you to where you are today.
Sure, absolutely. I like the Target story.
Thank you. You know, most of the good stories in my life have to do with my wife, so it always comes back to Target. I do. I'm a fan. Yeah.
I'm a big Elvis fan, and it reminds me of a story with Elvis Presley said some kid came up to him and asked him to sign this album that he hadn't seen in years and years, and he said, "How'd you get this album?" And he said, "I found it in the ditch."
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
Stumbled across. No, okay, yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I was a Marine Corps intelligence officer for 28 years and retired in 2020. And the reason I wrote a book is just because I happened to have a career that was, I was blessed, very fortunate to find myself in some strange places at just the right time. In fact, I mentioned in the book, I think you may recall that a lot of other officers called me the Forrest Gump.
Yep, I do.
Highest profile missions just out of luck.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I'm a little bit more mental acuity than Forrest Gump, so we could leave that part.
That's maybe open to interpretation, but go on. Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Early on in my career, I happened to be on a mission to rescue an Air Force pilot during the Bosnian conflict, which became a big deal, and they made into a movie about him. So that was kind of what kicked it off for me. And then
that was Scott O'Grady, right?
Scott O'Grady, that's correct.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to be involved in a lot of high-profile missions, the O'Grady mission, and then went to the war in Iraq, of course, where I wrote the after action for Marine Corps intelligence for Iraq, and then I was involved in Benghazi. I was the Marine Corps officer that was tasked to make a plan to send Marines in to reestablish security at the consulate and the embassy after the attacks. And, that was a big to do with Hillary Clinton,
Well,
et
you and I
cetera.
have never, we've talked about a couple different things that you wrote about, but that's one I don't think we ever really got into, and I really wanted to ask you about was the Benghazi piece, because I think there's still so much, years later, there's still so much mystery around that and misunderstanding of what happened. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So people get confused whenever I've talked about this or been on a podcast, or so they think, well, this guy, and in fact, it's kind of funny because Charlie Daniels, the singer
Mm-hmm.
who's passed away since, stumbled upon my story, read my book or something, and a lot of people think I'm the Marine that had Marines to send during the attack, and that we were told by politicians we couldn't send them, and therefore everybody died. That's not really the story. That in my case, I was the Marine that was tasked after the attack. So the attacks were over.
Yeah.
Everybody was. We were tasked to send Marines in to reestablish security. Okay, at the consulate as well as reinforce the embassy. And it was also kind of a big scandal because I had made a very nice plan with a lot of weapons and Marines and aircraft, and we were going to go in and establish dominance and send a message after the attacks. But basically, everything was stripped out of our plan by the State Department. When there's not a
Wow.
war going on, the State Department decides, gives approval for what kind of actions can take place in the country.
Right.
So they stripped down our plan for political reasons. They said they didn't want to send the wrong message until it was basically just a bunch of Marines getting on buses, with no weapons in civilian clothes because we didn't want to look. We didn't want it to look like we were coming in to invade Libya.
Yeah, but
You
that's
know,
frustrating, isn't it? I mean, that's one of those things we saw. And I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but when we were ending when we were ending in Afghanistan, and you've got 13 Marines killed. Some people would say largely because it was too small of a presence. And how often does that happen a lot, where we're scared of it looking like a conflict, so we understaff it?
believe it or not, it does happen quite frequently when Marines are planning. Now, not in a war. I'm not talking about war. In a war, you plan your attack and you do what you have to do. But when it's in these sort of political situations, terrorist attacks and things, there's a lot of discussion about messaging and what kind of message it's going to send, which frankly is disappointing to me. I think if you get
Right.
attacked, you send a very strong message. Don't attack us. But
Right.
yeah, we get mired down in that way too frequently, especially at the general officer ranks, and if you start getting the State Department involved,
Yeah.
really gets out of control. So the ultimately what happened, um, we were sent immediately to make a plan to go in there, and we had a plan that involved Osprey aircraft taking Marines fully loaded with weapons and equipment in uniform, establishing security and dominance at those sites, and
Yeah.
ultimately, and we were going to do it very quickly, but ultimately, we didn't send the Marines in until weeks after. And like I said, they were, in civilian clothes on buses.
That's wild.
That was very disappointing.
Yeah. Unbelievable. So, well, I guess you got it secured.
Yeah, they got it secured. And then they were authorized to get their weapons and put their uniforms on it, and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. At Benghazi, I was talking about my 28 years. That was one of the high profile missions. And then, when Edward Snowden
Yeah.
stole classified information from the United States, I led the investigation of that for the Marine Corps for what
Oh,
he
wow.
stole from. And that's another very hot political topic because
Yeah. Where is he now? Is he still in Russia?
Russia, yeah, and a lot of people consider him like a folk hero, but it's very
Yeah.
frustrating because forget about the NSA eavesdropping stuff. That was part of what came out from his espionage. But the fact of the matter is, and if you read my book, I mean, there was much more to it than that. He started stealing secrets long before any of that was even discussed. James Clapper, who used to be the director of National Intel, I believe, testified um, about something that made Edward Snowden mad. And so he claimed I started collecting this information after I saw Clabber. But if you read the congressional investigation, the fact is he started stealing it 4 or 5 months earlier.
Wow.
It was for reasons related to his employment and dissatisfaction with some stuff that was going on with his job. But it's hard to talk about. I told my wife the other day that I'm like not going to post anymore about Snowden or talk to people because people get so angry.
Yeah.
Half of the country thinks he's some hero, and then the other half thinks he's a traitor. And you either need to say one or the other to show where you fall out on the political spectrum. And it's very difficult for me because I have inside information. I was one of the people invested. So.
And I think, it's got to be interesting. And I think a lot of people ask, well, why don't we just go get him? Right. But he's not going to steal any more information, I would think, at this point. He's he's just going to be in hiding for the rest of his life. Right.
Yeah.
But he's not really a threat at this point.
Well, nothing I'm talking about is classified, by the way. It's in the congressional report that came out. But he stole a volume of data that was on hard drives. And he took them and gave them to our adversary, Russia, fled and was given asylum there. And they still possess these hard drives. And, this is almost, 9 years ago, I was involved in this. And at the time, we couldn't, he was sort of holding us hostage because he had all of this data and he would threaten to release it to the Russians. And so we don't know what he's released to the Russians.
You have to assume all of it, I imagine, right?
Maybe he keeps some of it to protect himself. But the problem is it's so old now. I mean, it's almost a decade old, a lot of the data. And we changed a lot of things that were compromised by him. The thing that people don't understand, it's like all they talk about is the NSA secrets, but they don't realize that he stole, millions of files, and a file could be anything from a one-page brief to a 3,000 sheet spreadsheet, And so job was to go through and determine what did he steal from the Marine Corps. And we did that. We determined what he stole from the Marine Corps. And a lot of it had nothing to do with the NSA, compromising the names of counterintelligence operatives in the Marine Corps. So part of our task was to mitigate the damage from what he stole. So, for example, we'd have to contact Marines who had been out for 9-10 years and say, hey, you've been compromised as a counterintelligence agent by this dude. So, we recommend you don't go travel to any former bloc countries, and these guys are like, what? I mean, my job, I have to travel. And it's like, well, what? So there was a lot more compromise than just the enemy.
Has there been any fallout in the years since, in the last 3-5 years or so from that, or is it pretty much just out of sight at this point?
Well, like I said, so much of the data that he stole is now almost a decade old. This was 2014 and 15, so it's losing its value. Which, like I said, back when I was involved in the investigation, we assumed that he was keeping himself secure in Russia by having this information, but only he knew how to access it. So, that provided him some security in terms of safe harbor with the Russians and making sure they didn't do anything to him.
Well, that's wild.
Haven't been involved in a long time, so
yeah.
I don't know what that is anymore. Wow. I can't imagine that information's that valuable.
I wouldn't think so. A lot of things have happened since then that.
Yeah, but the frustrating thing is how they were very adept at social media, and all that, and he sort of spun himself as this folk hero. Like, look what I did. I exposed the NSA whistleblowing secrets.
This was during the same period as the whole Julian Assange thing, right? The WikiLeaks. Was it tied to that in particular, or was that just coincidental that those were happening at the same time?
It was just coincidental.
Okay. Gotcha.
Snowden was a contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton. And again, this isn't my opinion because people get mad. In the congressional report, he was having some problems at Booz Allen, had falsified some information regarding his resume and his background, his education, his Army service. So he was starting to get into the disciplinary process. And then he sent a very scathing email to his company about a system-wide update. And if you read the congressional report, it says that he sort of considered himself smarter than the bosses. So he lectured them and sent a scolding email. And that was the last straw. And it looked like they were going to fire him, and then he stole all of this stuff. That's basically what happened.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, hopefully there's a lot of systems in place to stop that from happening again. But there was another one, though, that you mentioned, an investigation, the Hansen investigation.
Yeah, so Robert Hansen was one of the worst spies in U.S. history. He worked at I think it was the FBI,
Mm-hmm.
and had been giving information to the Russians for 30 years.
30
Something like
years.
Yeah,
That's
2020.
insane.
And I happened to be, I was a reservist for a good part of my career. So for about 16 years of my 28 years, I was in the reserves. But I spent so much time in uniform that it basically was like I was an active duty guy. I just went from orders to orders. But when I was not in uniform, I was at the State Department in the security directorate, diplomatic security,
Yeah.
managing the domestic security budget and policy section, which sounds so boring. Like saying that, but it was right before September 11th. So I was only there for 4 or 5 months, and then September 11th happened, and all of a sudden, domestic security, securing our facilities, and what kind of policies we were going to have against terrorists was really important. So once again, one of these situations where I just kind of fell backwards into the thing that everybody was talking about.
Yeah.
So, anyways, in that role, I helped draft the plans for the U.S. State Department. How would we secure all of our facilities, and that coordinated with the White House a lot, and we kind of instituted that across all of the federal government. But anyways, back to your question, it was during that time that Robert Hansen got busted.
Yeah.
Dead drop, I think, dropping classified information off in a park, and got arrested.
How did they find it though? Like he'd been doing this for so long, right? Why was there a tipping point when he just couldn't cover it up anymore?
I think I don't recall the specifics of how they busted him.
Yeah.
I know there had been rumors that there was a mole in the FBI, and I'm sure they ran some sort of investigation to entrap him into going out, not entrap, but to trap him
right
going out drops, which is what they did. I think the Russians gave him up, maybe.
Oh wow.
Set up a
That's
drop
wild.
in a park, and that's how they busted him. But he had been in and out of the State Department over decades, so my role in that investigation was just to figure out where he had been in the State Department, who he had talked to, what kind of secrets he could have stolen from the State Department based on that. So,
and was there other fallout from that you can recall? Like, were there other people that were associated that were that were taken down with him?
No, I don't recall.
Okay,
I
so yeah, that's interesting. See, Maeve, this is why I like talking to him. The man's got stories.
I know, but how do you even start, like, when they give you that information? How do you even start to like go all the way back to figure it out, like what happened, where it started?
Yeah, all of the State Department facilities, especially Harry S. Truman, which is the main building, are access control, with badges and swiping in and out. So you literally can build a history of somebody coming in and out of the State Department over decades. And so that was the first place we started, was going to get all the logs. And it was a stack, 24 inches high.
Wow.
Of all the times he had been in the State Department. So then you have to break down who did he visit, and then you go and, what was he here for, and try to figure out what he was doing there and what he was there stealing classified.
Unbelievable. So he was just getting paid for this? Is that the whole motivation?
He was getting paid.
Wow.
And the remarkable thing is when you look at the history of espionage and these people who do this, they're not like taking in millions and millions of dollars. Usually it's, tens of thousands at a time, and they do it over 30 years, and it adds up to, $300,000 or $400,000. I mean, it just seems
why?
Absolutely.
And then you get charged with treason, and then you're in prison for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Usually it has to do with debts or financial mismanagement or things they got themselves into, and they're desperate for money. Sometimes it's just ego and, trying to live a grandiose lifestyle. That's why when when we get briefed as intelligence officers in the Marine Corps and the other services, they have indicators, things you need to like look at your coworkers and see if there's debt issues, or if all of a sudden they showed up to work in a Ferrari and they wear nice, you know.
So those are all opportunities for our adversaries to get to utilize to get what they want.
Yes.
Gotcha. Unbelievable.
That's crazy.
There's a whole big world out there, Maeve. There's a whole big world out there.
Yeah.
You got me on the stories.
Good.
Stories. So, as I wrote in my book, and you're familiar with, my parents were both CIA operatives. From 1980 through the early 90s.
Did you read this part, Maeve?
No, Matt mentioned to me.
So, yeah.
In the beginning, like beginning of the week.
Yep.
And I was like, that's insane.
Yeah. So you were, you didn't know until later, right?
I didn't know until I was a teenager, 17, when they were given a choice that they either tell you, they sign a document that says they're going to tell you they're dependent when you turn 17, or they're not going to tell you. And they decided to tell me. And there was, I think I wrote about reasoning in the book why they came to that decision, just because I was a smart enough kid that I could start to ask questions and well, if we're, why aren't we doing this? And why do we live here? And why, so they just wanted to make sure I didn't ever blurt anything out, I guess. But the reason I brought that up is because you asked about fallout from Robert Hansen.
Yeah.
When I was at the State Department doing that access investigation, there really was nothing. But my mother was a Russian case officer for the agency, and she had a number of cases. And cases, from my understanding, I was never at the CIA, but just from my understanding, talking to them, is that, a case is like a person that you recruited to provide information to the agency. Say Russian cases, it means Russians that she had recruited to provide information. Yeah. And there's a famous spy named Aldrich Ames, who was one of the worst ones in U.S. history. And he actually gave a list to the Russians of a lot of people who were providing information, because he was very high up at the CIA in terms of the Russia desk. And a lot of those people that he gave up were my mom's cases. So, those people all assumed that they were executed or imprisoned, or they just went away. And
they just disappeared.
So that was a traumatic event. And my mother ended up leaving. That's why she left the agency. And then ended up returning years later, but didn't want anything to do with that sort of role. So I think she managed the director's airplane or something like that.
It's one of those things that you hear in movies or that sort of thing, but you forget sometimes that this stuff actually happens.
Right. I do think that they probably lean into the more wild stuff, but this stuff actually does happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of wild that you this was going on when you were a child, but then years later you're on the investigation side, looking at a similar case from a different perspective.
Yeah. It's kind of a family business.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
My uncle was also in the intelligence business, and he was very high in the Navy civilian intelligence side, and he created some of the intel systems that the military still uses. Very early classified teleconferencing technologies. He was more of a technology kind of guy, but so it was funny because, as I mentioned in the book, when I was a lieutenant as a Marine, I was really into the Marine part. I wanted to blow stuff up. And, do the physical part. And I thought it was great that we worked out so much and exercised. I love running and doing all that Marine stuff. So my initial years in Intel, I was a little disappointed because it was a bunch of nerds,
Yep.
Talking about computer systems. And it was right when all the network connectivity was taken off. So it was a lot of diagrams of computer systems and networks. And my eyes would just glass over because I had no interest in that at the time. And although it was my job, but I was young. And my uncle had been a very big deal in this world of naval Marine Corps intelligence and systems. So when I would go somewhere, people would ask me, his I won't say what his name is, but they would be like, you're so-and-so's nephew? And I would say, yeah, I'm his nephew. Because he had created the JADIS, which is
Oh, that's
Joint
cool.
Intelligence something system that they still use as top secret system that they use, to share intel, et cetera. And so they had this expectation that I knew, like, had that kind of skill or cared about those systems as much as he did. So his nephew, yeah. Well, then you must really know how to be. I'd be like, no, actually, I don't.
No clue. Yeah. That's awesome. What's the biggest misunderstanding about the intelligence community?
Well, the biggest by far is that it's like Jason Bourne,
Yeah,
you know.
that's what I wondered.
Intelligence community is a lot of processing data, unrefined raw data that you get, and you have to verify that it's valid intelligence. So it's a lot of analyzation and kind of, the nerdy
Yeah.
work than it is, going out and putting on disguises and, chasing people down and stuff like that.
Right. No
So,
assassins all over the world that you can just send a text to and send them out on a job. Yeah.
I mean, there's that aspect of it. The largest part is just a bunch of people processing data,
Yeah.
and so uh, to skip forward a little bit, because the last time I was on the podcast, you and I didn't talk about Afghanistan, and we
No,
can
we
talk
didn't.
about that.
Yeah.
But you got me on this subject. So when I retired, it was 2020 at the Pentagon, and I was director of regional intelligence within the J2 on the Joint Staff. So I went there to work for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, who was a Marine.
Yep.
And then I sort of inherited Millie,
Yep.
who came in. I've been there for a while. And so what I did at that point, regarding, how there's a bunch of nerds out there processing data into a refined intelligence, verified. So when we brief information, it's considered, factual. Like, this is refined intelligence. This has been verified by XYZ. It was provided to us or sourced by, this element. So it's pretty good to go. It's not like media information where you just try to get it out there really fast.
Sure.
To get it accurate. And so at that time, um, one interesting story is that when the COVID situation happened in, October, November, December of 2019, I was briefing to the joint staff, the chairman, vice chairman, all those people, that COVID, there was this new virus had broken out of a lab in China, and it was based on intelligence. So it wasn't just
Wow.
something I saw. It was like people were reporting that there was a lab leak, and this thing came out. And then I retired that spring, and that was still sort of what we briefed at the Pentagon. And then all of a sudden, in the media and the political spectrum, it became a giant argument about whether it came from a lab. And then it got so bad that at a certain point, if you said it came from a lab, you were some sort of nutty conspiracy person. But I had briefed it at the Pentagon
Wow.
times, and that was pretty much, what we discussed as fact. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a news article that discussed that and my role in that in the Mirror, I think, in the
Okay.
UK.
Okay.
Because, a couple of weeks ago, the government finally came out and said, okay, yeah, it was a lab leak.
So how frustrating is that, though, to be sitting at home like we all were during COVID and watching all of this going when you know what actually happened, but you're hearing them debate back and forth for months and months and months about, oh, that's a lie. They're just making that up. That's not what it is. And
It was very frustrating. In fact, there was a lot of times when I was, watching TV with my wife, and there'd be a political argument. Oh, they're nutty conspiracy people. They think it came from a lab. And the other people are saying it came from a lab and you're lying about it. And I would just turn to my wife and be like, what are they talking about? Like, I briefed this 6 or 7 times from intelligence at the Pentagon, before it all became an argument. And I was out of the Marine Corps at the time. So, it didn't matter anymore, but it was very frustrating.
oh, I'm
And
sure.
I almost am scared to talk about it now, because people will think I'm saying it based on political opinions, but I'm not. It's just it was a fact. It was in the intel. I briefed it, and
Wow.
nobody's problem with it.
That
It was
happens a
crazy.
lot in the media. I mean, that's the space that I'm in. And if you find something that is true and people are fighting about it, you just want to yell like, no, this is right, but you can't. Like, there's no point. It's a losing argument at that point.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating in general to see things on television.
Yeah.
Which many people have experienced, where you were personally involved in something or experienced something, and then you see it on television and they get it so wrong most of the time that it really just convinces you that anything you watch on television is suspect,
Is this going to end up being one of those things like, they're in the process right now of releasing like the JFK files and the RFK files and all. Is this going to be one of those 20 years from now they're going to release the truth about COVID?
Yeah, so that's what I said in that Mirror article, because they asked the exact same question. Like, what's stopping them from just coming out and saying, yes, there was intelligence in October, November of 2019 that said it came from the lab. And I think it's just, once you're caught in a lie, you're not just going to suddenly say, okay, I was lying. I'm sorry. You're just going to keep lying. So I imagine a decade from now or 2 decades, when those people are gone or no longer have a platform, then maybe the truth will come out.
Because that's what happened with all those with Martin Luther King and everybody else. They had to wait till basically all those people are no longer in existence to release it all. But that's going to be another interesting one. That's probably a whole nother episode, Maeve.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, like, I was thinking back on it, like, just COVID in general. Like, if I have grandkids, I'm gonna be like, do you remember that? And it's like, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I don't understand.
Yeah. They'll be like, what'd you do? And I'm like, well, I sat at home.
Did a lot of sitting.
Yeah, a lot of Facebook.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, what's Facebook? And yeah.
That's the whole other thing.
That's wild. So there was one last thing I wanna ask you about, and you and I touched on this a little bit when we had a conversation, but and I'm kind of a political nerd, right? I enjoy following politics. I enjoy dabbling in it a little bit in the world where I work, but one of the things you had the opportunity, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but you had an opportunity to go through a primary as a congressional candidate. What's that experience like? Like, is that what you thought it was going to be, or is it as frustrating as it sometimes seems?
It can be extremely frustrating. So, you've heard over the years, oh, it's all about money and, et cetera, et cetera. And you could maybe naively or innocently think, well, it can't be all about that. I mean, maybe the people, really drive the process. And then you get involved in a lot of it. There's a lot of good aspects of it, getting out there, learning everything about the area where you live, meeting thousands and thousands of people and seeing that there's so many good people out there and there's so many people who are concerned. But there is definitely sort of an establishment, if you will, or a lock process. And I don't want to make myself look bad or anything, but it basically comes down to, it's a competition to see who has the most rich friends.
Yeah.
And, who has the most rich friends, who has the most connections. And the primary process can be a little disappointing because you really have this idea that it's very ideologically pure. Like, you go out and the different candidates compare their qualifications and you speak in front of crowds together or apart, and the people see you and they get the opportunity to decide which person they like the best. And that would be great, but it's so heavily manipulated. You have more rich friends, you raise more money, your message gets out more than anybody else's, you get more mail in the mailboxes. So that's when they say it's all driven by money, that's what they mean. Whoever gets the most money is going to get the most mail in the boxes, and they're going to get their message out, and the people who don't are not going to get their message out. And then you have a lot of people trying to put their finger on the scale, elected officials getting behind certain people, or, even out of state elected officials or national figures getting involved. It's kind of a strange situation.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that what comes out of the end process is necessarily the strongest candidate. There was some very good candidates in there. I'd include myself, but there were some very good candidates, and we ended up with the candidate that ultimately lost. And we probably, many of us tried to say that is probably what was going to happen in the end. And that's what happened. So, it was definitely a learning experience. I wouldn't say it's all terrible, but it could definitely be improved.
Yeah, it's just interesting. We see it on TV so much, but to talk to somebody who's actually gone through the process, it's quite eye opening. I think they use the term "old boys network," and it seems to be that a lot of times.
Yeah, and you have to be careful because there's, if you are a candidate or a former candidate and you say, well, it's a good old boys network and I lost because I could, you come off, everybody says you come off looking sour grapes because the process is what the process is. And if you can't win under that process, then maybe you didn't deserve to. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, it needs to be changed.
Yeah.
There's, for example, there's contribution limits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of an individual can give to a federal candidate, congressional or president or senate is $3,300. But there's PACs where somebody can write a check for $10 million.
Right.
But the kid is not allowed to work with that PAC. So technically you can't ever talk to them. You don't know what they're doing. But they can take $10 million to support you. So they'll do their own mailers, their own stuff. And if you're caught coordinating with that PAC or talking, you're breaking federal law and you can go to prison. But so there's a contribution limit of $3,300, but people get around it because if it's $6,600 for a household. So you don't know how many checks people write it's for me and my wife, but it's some guy writing a $6,600 check instead of $3,300. So there's stuff like that.
Yeah. There's maneuvering around it a little bit. Wow.
Are you saying marketing was the most important thing?
Oh, Maeve, that's good.
It's good for me.
Yeah, see?
We need to tell Wendy to listen.
You have the most money, you get the most mail, you're going to do better than everybody else.
The most eyeballs. Yeah.
There you go, Maeve. So you're just trying to up your budget for this year of what you can spend. Is that what you're getting at?
He just said.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah, we'll have to edit that part out or something. I don't know. But, well, that's awesome. So you got another book. I told you this the last time we talked. You got another book in you. You got to start working on this. I think you can do it.
I don't know. I'll have to think about it.
I think you can put in the footnotes there that inspired by the USA Cares podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Afghanistan thing would have been good, but I think several people who were involved in that put out books quite quickly. So
I'm sure they did. But well, your path has been awesome. You've been very kind to share it with us, and man, I appreciate getting to know you, and thank you for your generosity of time with us and talking through this stuff. Is there anything you want to make sure you mention before we wrap up?
Anything I want to mention?
Yeah.
No.
If Maeve wanted to buy your book, American to the Core, today, if she wanted to go buy it, where would she get it?
Check the ditches. No.
It's not in the ditches.
Well, first of all, it's American to the Core, CORPS.
Yep.
But it's on Amazon.
Awesome. So definitely check out the book. It's a great read. I know I've really enjoyed it, and I've given it to a number of other people who have read it, and it just kind of gives you a look at the world a little bit different than maybe you've seen it. So definitely check that out. But my friend, thank you so much for being on. I hope we can do it again down the road and get together. But we really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right.
I enjoy it. Come back anytime, please.
Thank you so much. Well, Maeve, right. we've got a series of people coming up. Yeah. If anybody listening is new to the USA Cares podcast, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you come back and listen. We're all about trying to offer some hope, some encouragement, offer some interesting stories related to the world of the military, and we hope you come along for the ride. So check out usacares.org. Take a look at the work we're doing. If you want to support, we'd appreciate your contributions. But until next time, Maeve, it's been fun.
Yeah. See you all soon.
See you soon.
Here we go.